I'm now looking forward to speaking about the digitalization of the Nordschleife, the Northern Loop. It's a great project. 11 million has been invested by Nürburgring into this project, and I'd like to welcome Jörn Nitschmann of Fujitsu, Alexander Schnobel as head of facility management of Nürburgring, and Christian Stefani, whom you've already met, the managing director, one of the managing directors of Nürburgring 1927. Welcome upstage. Christian, just considering what we've communicated for the year, we're going to get started with the digitalization of Nordschleife. It's a massive project, 11 million euros. By 2025, we want it finished. But what does this major invest mean? What does that project mean for Nürburgring? Well, maybe we have to explain something first. We've spoken much about racing. There are many other types of usage of our course here, anyway, of our track circuit. At the Nordschleife, for example, we have test operations with an industry pool, and as OEMs also hire the course, we have tracks on the Nordschleife, and we have tourist drives as well. And the situation is other than in racing, because it's not possible for us to have up to 500 sports vehicles available at the same point in time. People can't do it. They're not always available. Plus, the technical prerequisites, just like for motoring, for motorsports, isn't always possible. Not all cars have GPS trackers. So basically, when it comes to circuit or track safety, if we want to develop it further, this can only be done via digitalization. This means that we want to render the track visible. There should be cameras installed, and safety around Nordschleife should be taken towards a modern era. And the aim is clear. What we want is that response times to accidents are shortened, rescue teams can be given concrete information, and what's also very important is that the information behavior for oncoming traffic, approaching traffic can be optimized so that there would be fewer follow-up reactions and less of a domino effect, so that there would be a better warning system for the upcoming drivers. So that should be facilitated by digitization. All that sounds very good. The cameras around the circuit, for the first time giving the people acting in race control a direct view of the course. But why have you partnered up with Fujitsu? Why do we have Jörn here? Well, basically, it's got something to do with the length of that track. We always speak about 21 kilometers, and you can imagine it's quite a few cameras together with the Grand Prix track. This would be 150 cameras. I don't think you can expect anybody in race control to watch over 150 cameras at the same time. So we will need artificial intelligence, AI, for race control to assist and providing signals that something has happened that's worthwhile inspecting, so that race control can actually trigger a reaction. And for that purpose, we partnered up and contacted Fujitsu back then, and with the test cluster that we installed at Döttinger Höhe back then, we tested and found out a few things. And at the end of last year, we came to the conclusion that we wanted to follow that path, and we are following it. This is at the heart of the digitalization project now, because without an integration of artificial intelligence, things are just not possible to implement. A digital infrastructure can only be used like that. You've spoken about the types of usage. You must imagine things work out like this. There are the track marshals, and there are various radio systems that they're using, but usually during official races, you have a lot of people working there, but there are other drives for the industry pool where digitalization comes into play much more. Yes, absolutely. And you have to say that in racing, there's also the permit aspect. In other words, you would have to obtain a permit or a kind of driving license for Nordschleife. It's not just the professionals, they have much experience, but for tourists this is not the case. And classical tourists would like to test it too. And it is the most ambitious circuit in the world, and sometimes damage occurs at cars or at guardrails, and we want to reduce such damage, of course, in future and make the circuit more safer. Or even the oncoming traffic or approaching traffic shouldn't have so many accidents. You know, it's been 1.5 years that the test cluster with 8 cameras and the 3.5 kilometer stretch has been tested with you thoroughly. And maybe you could give us some more detail and tell us if people are wondering, why is it Fujitsu and a racing course, a track? Why are you represented as you are? Why are you here? Well, thank you very much on behalf of Fujitsu for having us here today, and thank you very much for the trust you're placing in us for the next few years that we're going to rise through the challenges together. I think it was in November 2021 when we came here with a similar weather, and we talked about similar things, but and different things. This was also about digitalization. It was about the pandemic. How could technology help? And this is part of the DNA for Fujitsu. Really, it has a history. We have a history similar to the Nürburgring. Almost 100 years is our age, and we are trying to give something back to society, using equipment and technology to make the environment safer, to make traffic mobility safer. So there's very much emotion about this in this for us as well. So we're using all technology to create surroundings that really assist, that are supportive, and that's where Fujitsu comes into play. And what's going to come of it will be shown in a bit with some impressive pictures. Alexander, if this were a TV format, I would say that you've only just been at Nordschleife, but now on the show stage, you're still recognizable. With your jacket, with your yellow vest. But if you sort out the project for yourself, we're speaking about the track, the circuit, tarmac renewal, higher standards must be met. Now, this digitalization activity, it's an investment of 11 million euros. What does that mean for you, as you're very responsible in this task, in your role? For me, as an engineer, this is a project that's all about joy. I'm also seeing that with a great team of fantastic colleagues, for years, for almost 10 years, developments have taken place. The whole project, as we see it now, has actually been developed out of the Nürburgring and for the Nürburgring. There's nobody external who's given us advice, but there have been so many colleagues given input. Along many steps, we put together our jigsaw puzzle, and there's been so much detail that's been put into a whole picture now. That's a very positive approach. I think that obviously over the past 8 years or so, 26 million euros has already been invested into the circuit. And that's already included. 15 million alone was invested in the circuit as such, safety installations, providing for better tarmac, etc. And you have to see even today that Nordschleife, that loop, is a highly modern racing piece, and it already meets the highest international safety standards. Having said that, though, the infrastructure is, and it is a living system, optimized very much towards the functionalities it should have. And now we need to take a new step into the digital world, opening up for new solutions that are necessary. We need to think of solutions, invent them, implement them, and we also need to put them into practice in terms of construction, given the circumstances we have to work in. And we've been working on that since November, and we've seen some digging. We haven't found any oil, that's all I can say for the moment, but a lot of infrastructure had to be installed, because cameras and artificial intelligence are one thing, but I think we have a circuit, a track that takes you through the Eifel highlands and the forests for 21 kilometers, and that's a challenge. What was the challenge for your team? Well, that challenge is rather known. We've been dealing with it for over 90 years. The infrastructure has been maintained and further developed for over 90 years. But this was about getting the individual pieces into one. And first of all, we had to know what we wanted. A few years ago, we started digitalizing the GP track. Then we looked into details such as masts that had to be given wind resistance. The cameras would have to be installed in them later for the artificial intelligence purposes. And they have to be connected. How do you get all that into an IT center, a data center? The new race control in 2020 already gained some experience in that respect. And the major innovation and fortune for us, or luck for us, was that at Döngerhöhe, a test track or piece could be installed, where the systems could be checked up to the smallest cable connection underground. And artificial intelligence. Everything was tested thoroughly. Individual systems, such as a network-independent power generation system, power supply, was developed. The building permits could also be clarified, and the companies implementing the project have now been given their requirements, and we're sure what we can develop further next year. So a test on 2.5 kilometers is now going to be scaled up to 21 kilometers. Maybe you could give us an outlook. We said that in 2025 the system should be up and running. The installations are still going on. Masts have been implanted. Everything has been prepared at the first stage of the project for up to Breitscheid, and then we're going to continue. But could you give us an outlook as to what's in store for us up to 2025? What do you and your team have to do?
Let me give you a few indicators. 8.5 kilometers is the length of the track, roughly 17 kilometers of cable length. Then optical fiber has been laid underground, and 4 of these off-grid systems will be installed. And they will cover some segments on the circuit with power, and that is fed by solar energy, so it's very sustainable. And then intermediate power installations and batteries. For this purpose, 51 foundations have been cast, and on these we position 7-meter-high masts and the Nordschleife. Work is still in progress. The last masts should be set up just before the test drives will start. So as far as civil engineering and the rest is concerned, it's a whole lot of work. And now we are entering the final phase, but at the same time we are doing the fine-tuning for the second construction phase. This is the eastern part we are tackling from Breitscheid to the Galgenkopf. Now, this year, the T13 Sabine Schmidt's curve until Breitscheid have been covered. Infrastructure and cables have been laid. Next year, it will be an addition of 20% we have to perform. But this will be an exciting challenge once again. But we know what we have to do. There's a whole lot on our plate. Thank you very much for this insight. And we saw it on the film in the background as well. Yeah, we will leave that video because as of 25, the system is to be implemented. But at the moment, you're still about to do thorough testing and development. What can we say about the results coming out of the test clusters so that the system will work in the future the way it's supposed to work? What is your job? Now, it's quite important to advance one thing. We as Fujitsu are quite used to tackle customers' IT challenges, be it infrastructure, but also service and operation of computer centers. And this is something we're doing around the clock. Now, when it comes to this situation, this is about developing a software which has never existed, because it's about circuit track safety, which I cannot just order in the internet or retrieve from the cloud as a service. Now, this is a new challenge, and we had very thorough discussions and got an overview. You see the Döttinger Höhe as of the Galgenkopf, which was mentioned by Alexander, until the Hohenrhein segment. This is what we looked into, and we wanted to see what cameras can do, and what are the things we need to take into consideration so that we can come up with a fully fledged image processing. What about latency times? What about other topics? Are there any incidents or stories that would present a particular challenge, aside from the weather, as we can see today, but all the other things then can have an impact on the result? We want to deliver good results. So this is a picture of the track. It's to look like. One of the cameras and the vehicles on the track can be observed. We've got 8 cameras on the track at the moment, which deliver results, which helped us to further develop our system. There's some moving pictures as well you brought along, and I think you are the person who is best suited to explain that situation. Let us know what kind of moving pictures you collected and what were your insights and the results. Yes, it's a great pleasure for me to do so, because it becomes more comprehensible for those hearing, listening and watching us. Now, this is one segment we have tackled, and that is the start of our job, namely recognizing the different objects that are on the track during tourist drives and other events on the Nordschleife. As we mentioned beforehand, it is about recognizing as to whether it's vehicles on the track that don't have any transponders, which don't have any signature, which have to be collected in a different system. And we're using a camera recognition system. As you can see here, passenger cars are being detected, motorbikes are being identified as well. But at the same time, the pictures help us to learn that other objects can't be recognized that well. Persons on the track, for example. Motorbikes, yes, with a driver. Motorbike without a driver, no, it's not okay yet. So these were the first steps of our approach. That is something we had to teach the system, and why the number of pictures we were able to teach the system in order to recognize the various and different vehicles. So that was something we had to start off with, and the results are visible here. You always see the percentage as to whether the object has been recognized or not, and things are getting better over the time. But there were other conditions that were added. For example, the track in different segments shows different situations depending on the weather. For example, you see a wet segment here under wet and humid conditions. Now we have to guarantee safety here as well. But you always have to add the system at the end of the day is only as good as physics allows it to be. So the person to be recognized on a camera is one thing, but artificial intelligence can also recognize if there is too much mist on the segment, if there's fog or whatever. So the system must be further proved and hardened and see. You have to see what kind of limits can be achieved and not exceeded, and what kind of weather conditions, for example, exist. But this is working quite well. But of course, we had to also take into consideration other abnormalities, as you can see here. And that might be a further enlightenment. Let me start all around. What are the objects or things we met during our test phase? And this is where artificial intelligence comes in. And there's a whole lot of discussions going on about programs and theses and master theses about this topic. Now, what you have to say, an ant of the Eifel region, as you can see on the left-hand side at the top of the picture, is not a normal abnormality, i.e. that there would be a piece of a vehicle on the track which could be an obstacle and triggering an alarm. No, it could be that any special bird that's looking for its nest because the camera looks like it could be suitable as a nest, or something drop on the camera until the wipers set in, is something you need to take into consideration. So at the moment, the system has to consider and recognize this is okay, there is no alarm to be triggered, but it is something you have to transfer to the next part in the system as well. So that's what you're learning, the test cluster, the camera positions, all that comes into play when you want to provide the appropriate information. Let me show you a few pictures as well, and that shows what's happening in the background. And that's part of the job when Alexander with his team will then hand over the cameras and hand over the camera signals. Then we have to do exactly what's shown here. That's a rather colorful presentation. We must make and do a segmentation of the camera pictures. So the system must know where the track is, where there is protecting fence, guardrails, what kind of areas are not recognizable, well, in dependence of some abnormalities. And that's happening for the next 50 cameras that will be rolled out. So all that is being measured, segmented, and then handed over to the software. And this is a step-by-step approach, and you can only do that in such a way. And in view of the time, once again, you can only do it once a camera segment has been completed. Now, what's the next step we achieved? That's shown on the next picture. A very nice position, because the vehicles are very fast and we have to learn from a lot of pictures. There's one element you can see here, that's the identification of vehicles. And I think that were test drives where we used very, very fast cars which are driving in the high-speed areas, but also in pulse operation. And you all know that when there's tourist drives, there are a whole lot of vehicles on the track, so you have to identify the ideal machine numbers have to be transferred so that the actual vehicles can be clearly identified on the track with their respective position and the conditions they're driving in. And this is a segment where we are talking about high speed. So it was very precious for us, the findings we got, in order to translate them into the next segments. But you also see where we reach physical limits at the horizon, where we can only recognize certain spots and images. So you have to take into consideration the distances between one camera and another, and do we have to use different openness of camera positioning. And then identification of objects and issues. We have a situation which is unfortunately not nice, which is represented here, but which gives us an impulse of what the system can deliver at the end of the day. This is an accident that happened. And on the left-hand side, you see, when you go through the loop, how the vehicle in the schematic presentation turns into orange. And in the camera control, an alarm will be triggered, telling you there is an abnormality. A vehicle went off-road, off-track. The alarm is triggered, so you will take a closer look. And this is where we will blow up the camera picture, and there is an impulse. Something has to happen. In this case, the vehicle hits the guardrail as well, and it's clearly identified because it stopped, and it will trigger a further alarm. Now, there are rule-based systems behind which will define what's going to happen after that. We are not experts for a race course or the operation of a race course, and this is happening in coordination with the colleagues on site, and this is how we define what's to happen next in order to trigger the next action. Now, it's very important to have actions defined, what's happening on the LED panels for the following vehicles, as of which point in time are we going to alert, etc., etc. Now, what's happening next? It is quite nice to see how people on the track can be recognized. Now, in the backdrop, you see the road. These objects or these parts are hidden, but also elements where the marshals are positioned. They are recognized as positive situations, but the system recognizes if there are people on the track which shouldn't be on the track, people running around which represent danger for others. That's very important, and this is where we see the results of segmentation. Some elements are absolutely okay, others are not. It's very important for the system to derive an alarm and to give an impulse for an action to be taken by marshals, for example. Now, this is rounding off the whole story of the system. What will the system bring once it's been upscaled? We put people in the foreground, and they will be in a position to monitor the more than 100 camera positions, because the critical elements will be predefined and then trigger certain predefined actions. Maybe we can look at the next slide as well, because I think it shows quite clearly what's been mentioned by Christian. Not only technical providers are important and a certain contract of who is to supply what. No, it is more, it's reaching out to partnership. At the access to the Nordschleife, there is an advertising panel we have commonly agreed on. So it's a lot of partnership. What does the partnership with Fujitsu mean to you, Christian? It is a totally new area we are entering into. So it's not been imaginable so far that at some point in time we would have a partnership with a group like Fujitsu. So far, a matching between Fujitsu and motorsports has not existed, and all of a sudden you came up with the digitalization approach, and that offers a whole lot of new opportunities. Now, what does such a partnership mean? When Inge and I got involved in the project, it was an ongoing project with the test cluster already. We immediately saw the passion, the enthusiasm that was committed to the project on both sides. Alexander did mention so a few minutes ago. It is a very, very special task that is to be tackled by both parties at a very important venue, and it's a very important milestone for Nürburgring. I'm deeply convinced about that. So it was a very special thing. It's not just an ordinary project that's being operated by Fujitsu or run by us. Now, you could feel right from the outset, both parties were commonly working on a solution of which they wouldn't even know what the end result could be and if it would work at all. As it was just shown, everything was tried and tested, and maybe Nürburgring could take a totally different direction with that project. So it was quite remarkable. It was not a pret-à-porter product. It was a solution that was jointly worked out by the two partners. It's unique worldwide. Jörg, what is your perspective? What is your view? Yes, I can only agree to that. And as I said earlier on, we are not experts for racetracks. The technologies we are using here are technologies that could be used and imagined for other application fields as well. As I said before, traffic mobility, urban environments, but also production environments where I can recognize the behavior of machines and people, and where there could be critical situation in the production lines in the automotive industry and others. But these technologies are now being introduced in a totally different field. And this is why we highly depend on feedback from the team, from the partner, because we must understand how processes work, what kind of rescue and safety aspects must be taken into consideration. So we learn from each other, we listen to each other, and our claim is not to come along and say, we are the expert, we know how to work it out. No, it's quite the opposite. We are learning about totally new situations, and that is so good in that partnership. And I said we started in December 2020 until the real discussion started, and during the test cluster as well, we had a very constructive exchange, and we further developed things. And due to the requests and the feedback we got, as far as the project is concerned, we see that there are totally different challenges we are asked to tackle now, because the uniqueness of the Nordschleife is there. It is not something you would find elsewhere. It's not easily to translate anyway. But we also see that we got requests from other customer situations, other industries, and that's quite exciting for us as well.
Thank you, Christian. Before we start Q&A, just one last question. Digitalization of the Nürburgring and Nordschleife doesn't mean, expressly it doesn't, that the human factor should be depleted, does it? Do we reduce staff? No, absolutely not. We still need all the track marshals and everybody. So I'd just like to invite everybody for the 24-hour races, for example, or other races to apply. We cannot work without human beings at Nordschleife because the machine or AI can't replace everything. We will always need people who can interfere in an emergency. And especially in racing, we will need human beings. This is not about reducing staff anywhere on the track, but it should only be a complement. It should add safety towards a better future. Thank you very much.